I would now like to read a telegram that I received yesterday morning from Santa Barbara. I am pleased to send warm greetings to everyone gathered for the dedication of the Clayton H. Mickelsen Memorial Lounge at Washington State University. As Americans, we have been blessed with the freedom to choose the course of study and the career best suited to our individual talents and abilities. We must never forget that this precious freedom was won through the sacrifice of those like Captain Clayton H. Mickelsen, who endured untold hardships and gave his life in defense of liberty. It is fitting that you have chosen to dedicate your student lounge to the memory of an American hero. And as you honor him, let us all pledge to keep faith with him by cherishing the ideals he served so proudly and so well. Nancy and I send our best wishes for a memorable ceremony and for every future success. God bless you, Ronald Reagan. In order to understand Clayton Mickelsen's story, we've asked a number of people to share their thoughts. The first is Dr. Robert Clinton, class of 1939, one of Clayton's classmates, and we appreciate him very much substituting, as it were, for Dr. Steele Livingston. Dr. Clinton, please.
We are gathered here to pay homage to Clayton, and I'm sincerely sorry that Steele, Clayton's roommate through college, has not recovered from surgery to be here in my place. During our college years in the late 30s, near the end of the Great Depression, most of us were too busy working our way through college and studying to socialize much. It seemed that the professors were always trying to eliminate us by pushing huge amount of works at us. It will be 49 years in June since Clayton and I each went our separate ways. Then the war went, then the war. He went west, and I fought the Battle of Smoky Hill Army Airfield in Kansas. Since I can't really tell any tales about Clayton, I've been asked to reminisce a bit about the college days. There are a number of things to be told. So briefly, I'll state that the Vet Shack, as it was known, starting in the basement were dogs, cats, and not many cats as I recall. Dr. Covington's physiology and pharmacology labs, lecture room, and the dean's office. The next floor was a large animal clinic and lab and lecture rooms. The top floor for anatomy, pathology, lecture, and lab, that's a very brief outline, but basically it gives you a little idea of the dear old Vet Shack. We had a lot of other words for it. The doctors that tried to pound some knowledge into us at that time, as I recall, were first Dean Wegner, a good gentleman that had to work hard to acquire financing just to keep the college going. He also taught a class to the seniors, but for the life of me, I can't recall what that class was. Frank Bell, a young instructor, on his first tour of teaching anatomy, as long as we did not cross him or argue with too much, we managed to get along very nicely. Hilton Smith, instructor in bacteriology, from whom all of us benefited if we really wanted to. Leonard Newman, clinician, outpatient, and calls. He would take 3 or 4 of us on calls, and I think it took a special man to put up with a group of green students the way we were. I wonder if we might not have been the part of the reason for Dr. Newman leaving college and going to practice in Ellensburg. Dr. McCullough, parasitology and another course or two. If my memory serves me correctly, he seemed to push parasites and other small creatures in faraway places and very little about the local parasites which most of us would wanted and needed. Nicholas Covington, physiology and pharmacology. An interesting individual. He'd give us 3 tests a semester, and if we overdosed an animal in pharmacology, he was always threatening to give us a double flunk. I don't really know that he ever did it or not. In his Physiology 3 class, to the general student body, the most attractive student sat in the front row. showed a bit of their legs and had it made. Never seemed to help any of us, though. Dr. McCoy, obstetrics and clinic, an excellent instructor. There have been numerous tales about him, most of them true. One I well remember in obstetrics during our final semester. On a Sunday afternoon, right after lunch, we entered this classroom. Across the front of the room were 2 tables covered with various instruments for the removal of difficult fetus from cattle, horses, sheep, pigs, and goats. None for cesarean section. He spent most of the hour explaining how, when, where, and why in the use of the various instruments. Just before the bell, he carefully stated, all these help in one way or another, but God gave you 2 hands, brains, and for God's sakes, use them. Some good practical advice. I seem to remember classes, mostly labs, every Saturday, and if we had patients, large or small, we were responsible for them until they left the clinic, one way or the other. Those were interesting, hard years for everyone because of the lack of space and hard times. I'm happy that our college has more space and more modern facilities we never even dreamed of at the time. And I'm sure that the students that are around here now, 50 years from now, there'll be about as much change as we're experiencing. We practitioners are just sorry that there is not more time to prepare students for the doctor-to-client and doctor-to-patient relationship. Thank you.
We have a very special guest with us, and I must apologize. In the program it indicates that Dr. Ott graduated from Oklahoma State, and he just told me Oklahoma wasn't even a state when he was in school. Dr. Herbert Ott graduated from the Ohio State University and was, well, I'm not going to tell you, he'll tell you his relationship to Clayton Mickelsen. Dr. Ott.
Well, as you know, the war did not last long for us in the Philippines. Our Air Force was destroyed almost entirely on the ground in the first few days. So 100,000 Japanese troops had approximately 20,000 total Army, Navy, Marines in the Philippines. So we merely fought a delaying action from Lingayen Gulf. The Philippines is an island with mountains on either side and a broad central plain, so the only way to successfully invade was through this central plain from Lingayen Gulf. Clayton Mickelsen was stationed with the 26th Cavalry up in the middle of the island of Luzon, not too far from Lingayen. So when war broke, they were sent up to Lingayen, and one day in the early days of the war, he found himself bringing up the rear of the cavalry with his medical supplies in a pickup truck. The Japs were on his tail. So there was only one main road, and he and Colonel Trapnell parked their pickup truck crossways on a bridge, scattered gasoline, set it on fire, and delayed the Japanese temporarily, and that's the action for which he received the Distinguished Service Cross. Well, we all eventually got back into Bataan. Approximately 350 mules were left of the 26th Cavalry. It was demounted and personnel was sent with other units. Clayton and Lieutenant Frank set up a corral about a mile in circumference for these 350 mules. They were then started to being killed off at the rate of 8, 10, 12 a day for food for the troops. Well, this went on till about the end of March, and he was attached to me. I had a quartermaster pack train Philippine scout. Our job was to take supplies from where the trucks dropped it right up to the front lines. These horses and mules, say, were were pretty good food. As you know, we went on half rations in Bataan on January the 4th, less than a month after war broke out. Well, lack of food, malaria, dysentery, and so on decimated our forces to the extent that when Singapore fell at the end of February, the Jap brought in another 100,000 troops, so there were approximately 200,000 Japanese against 20,000 of us total on Bataan. That's American personnel. Why, in about a week, it was all over. Well, we started the death march, and Clayton was with me at that time, and we marched as far as anybody because we were at the opposite side of the peninsula from where the Japs came in. They came in this way. It took them 3 days to get to where we were. And I'll have to say that not all Japanese are bad, just like anybody else. Our first contact was with the Japanese colonel at noontime. We were just sitting down to eat. We started killing more of the mules, so we had a few good meals. It took them 3 days to get to where we were. So we asked this Japanese to sit down and eat with us. He was a big burly fellow with a big black beard, and he sat down and ate with us, and we had sort of a friendly chat. He told us to take our bedding roll in our truck, proceed to a certain place, and that things would be okay. I will say that we were told to destroy everything except enough transportation and gasoline to take us out of Bataan. So there was no need really for the death march. As we marched out of Bataan, we went by 2 of our general hospitals. Corregidor is an island at the entrance to Manila Bay where the harbor defenses are with the large guns. When we marched out of Bataan, we passed by our 2 general hospitals where the Japanese had set up their 10-inch guns, started firing on Corregidor. Well, it went war is war, and you can imagine what happened. Corregidor fired back. We actually killed some of our own personnel in our own hospitals on Bataan. We went by shell holes 25, 30 feet across. Well, we marched on then out of Bataan, and since we were 3 days delayed in starting, it was our job to clean up the dead and partially dead, and it was on that these days, the first part of the march, that we were actually made to bury the dead. There were not much life in them, I will admit, but things had to be cleaned up, and it was our job to do it. One afternoon, before we got to the end of the death march, Clayton and I were quite tired, and we slipped out of the line one afternoon. We marched in a column of 4s. You did your best to get in the middle because if you were on the outside, they would jab at you with bayonets or clubs or whatever. So we slipped out for a couple, 3 hours, got a little rest, and decided about taking to the hills. Well, having been indoctrinated in the Geneva Convention, and thinking everything over, well, especially being medical personnel, we should be repatriated or exchanged probably in a few weeks. We'd be home. So we got back in line and started marching, finished the death march at a place called San Fernando. Death march is approximately 75 miles. Propaganda wins wars. I know, we were on the other side. Life magazine says 125 miles, something like that. We were stuffed in boxcars, taken to Camp O'Donnell, the first camp where there were about 10,000 Americans, 50,000 Filipinos. In 6 months, 1,200 Americans died there. Approximately 30,000 out of the 50,000 Filipinos died. Malaria, dysentery, lack of food. I got home with a diary. I can back this up. One day I counted 409 dead bodies carried out. It was in the hundreds for days. Mickelsen and I and some other medical personnel were transferred to a place called Cabana Tawan. There were a few days, and then we were sent to Camp number 3, where the Corregidor people were. This was about 2 months later. We were there a short time, and then in October of '42, Mickelsen and about 2,000 others were sent to the southern islands in the Philippines, a place called Davao Penal Colony, and their job was to do farm work and that sort of thing. Things weren't too bad there, as I understand it. Clayton Mickelsen came back in the fall of '44, along with all the others, and I was with him then again for a couple of months. About November '44, he and 1,619 officers and men were selected to go to Japan. They were taken to Manila, put in a place called Bilibid Prison. 13th is my lucky number. I was born on the 13th, graduated from Ohio State on the 13th, and so on. I was selected as one of 13 officers and men to stay behind and look after 500 sick people. As a result, on the night of January the 30th, 1945, I and these 512 others were released from 25 miles behind the Japanese lines by Alamo Scouts and 6 Rangers without a loss of any of the prisoners. Two of the personnel who came in to rescue us were lost. Well, Captain Mickelsen and these 1,300 others didn't get out of Manila Bay until they were bombed by Navy planes. They got around Bataan Peninsula to Subic Bay, where our present naval base is, were bombed again the next day, and about 300 lost their lives. What was left on the ship had to swim to shore. Machine guns were set up on the shore, and if you got out of range of where these machine guns were set up, why, you were executed. They were then put on boxcars, sent up to Lingayen Gulf, put on the Orinoco Maru, the so-called Hell Ship. It eventually arrived in Tacao, Formosa, was bombed again, and about another 300 lost their life in those ships. I have some information, specific information about some of these things. If anyone would be interested, I'd be happy to give it to you later. The ship arrived in Moji, Japan on the January the 31st, 1945. There were 497 still living out of the 1,619. Captain Mickelsen was in one of these 497 were split into 4 groups, sent to Fukuoka, Japan, and Clayton died in Fukuoka on February the 4th, 1945, of malnutrition, avitaminosis, what have you. I can tell you about all the vitamin deficiencies there are. We all had them. I was just lucky the good Lord was with me, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the United States Army Veterinary Corps, and it's an honor to participate in this dedication. I've been asked to make some comments on the U.S. Army's recognition of Dr. Mickelsen, and the most significant, of course, was the Distinguished Service Cross, which he received for the action in the Philippines. To paraphrase the description of the award, the Distinguished Service Cross, and I'll read this, is awarded to an individual while serving with the Army, distinguishes himself by extraordinary heroism while engaged in action against an enemy of the United States. The act of heroism must have been so notable and involved risk of life so extraordinary as to set the individual apart from his comrades. The award is subordinate only to the Medal of Honor and is the second highest Army award for heroism in combat. As far as we can determine, Dr. Mickelsen is the only veterinarian to have ever received this award. When Dean Wilson contacted me, we attempted to verify this, and on all the research we did, we can confirm that there's no evidence that would suggest otherwise, and feel very comfortable. I feel very comfortable that Dr. Mickelsen probably was the only veterinarian to ever receive the Distinguished Service Cross. One of the things that I was asked to do is to read the order that described this award, and I'll do so now. But Dr. Mickelsen's excuse me, heroic actions in the battle for the Philippines are well described in General Orders Number 11, dated 18 January 1942, awarding the Distinguished Service Cross. And this reads, by direction of the President, under the provisions of the Act of Congress approved July 9, 1918, the Distinguished Service Cross is awarded by the Commanding General, United States Army Forces in the Far East, for extraordinary heroism in action to the following named officer of the United States Army Forces of the Far East: Clayton H. Mickelsen, 0379323, 1st Lieutenant Veterinary Corps, 26th Cavalry, Philippine Scouts, for extraordinary heroism in action at Rosario, La Union, Philippine Islands on December 22, 1941. During a concentrated fire from enemy tanks and infantry at close range against the rear guard of the 26th Cavalry, Lieutenant Mickelsen, with one other officer, with total disregard of his personal safety, remained between the hostile troops and his own force, set fire to a truck placed on a bridge, and remained at the bridge exposed to enemy fire until satisfied that the bridge was in flames. Subsequently, Lieutenant Mickelsen, with the other officer in a scout car, moved slowly with the rearmost elements of the 26th Cavalry, picking up the wounded and collecting and giving orders to stragglers. By his heroic actions, Lieutenant Mickelsen prevented unhindered pursuit by the hostile tanks, saved the lives of a number of wounded, collected many stragglers, and set an inspiring example of courage for the entire regiment. By command of General MacArthur, Official R.K. Sutherland, Major General, General Staff, Chief of Staff. Signed, Carl H. Sills, Colonel, Adjutant General Corps, Adjutant General. So this, I think, it kind of goes with what's been said along the line, and that is the specific citation that was with the award of the Distinguished Service Cross. As a corollary to the search for the information on Dr. Mickelsen's Distinguished Service Cross, we were reminded that the Army Veterinary Corps had dedicated its library at the Meat and Dairy Hygiene School in Chicago to Dr. Mickelsen. For a number of years, many veterinarians in the Army and their technicians studied and used references in the Mickelsen Library. When the school moved to Fort Sam Houston, Texas in the 1970s, as part of the Academy of Health Sciences, the library was closed. So far, all attempts to find any memorabilia recognizing this event have been unsuccessful. Mr. Mickelsen, I'll tell you that we are searching. We will continue to search, and if we can locate the plaque dedicating that lounge or any other memorabilia reminding us of Dr. Mickelsen and his involvement with the Army Veterinary School in Chicago, we intend to try to get that and to put it in the Mickelsen Lounge here at Washington State University at a future date. Thank you.
Clayton Mickelsen was a student here. We still have students here. Representing the students, who will be the primary beneficiary of the Mickelsen Lounge, is our student chapter president, Greg Benoit.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here today and to say a few words on behalf of the students of the College of Veterinary Medicine. The Student Lounge is a unique place. There's rarely a time of the day or night when there's not a student using the lounge. The lounge serves many purposes, be it social or business, and on a rare occasion, academic. That's probably what makes it such an appealing place. The lounge is a place that we just sit and maybe read the Daily Evergreen before we have to go to class in the morning. Or just a relaxing place where we can sit and eat lunch during the Pullman winters when we can't get outside. It's a place we can catch a quick nap between classes if we didn't get a long enough one during class. It's been a fitting room to try on surgery scrubs for junior surgery. It's also been a place to convince the Oregon State students that there's no way the Beavers are going to beat Erickson's Air Express in football this season. Most importantly, the Student Lounge is a place to chew the fat and to develop friendships that will be long-lasting. It's an honor to have the Student Lounge dedicated to a man who is so completely committed to his profession and to his country. The generous contributions by the Mickelsen family and the founding donors are a symbol of Dr. Mickelsen's continued commitment to the excellence of the veterinary field. May Dr. Mickelsen's commitment and selflessness serve as an example to veterinary students and to graduate veterinarians alike. On behalf of the students of the College of Veterinary Medicine, I would like to extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to the Mickelsen family, the founding donors, and all those who made it possible for the dedication and remodeling of the Clayton H. Mickelsen Memorial Lounge. Thank you.
The dedication of this lounge will serve as a constant reminder of the Capt. Mickelsen and the many people who gave so much so that we could be here today. He will always be regarded as a cougar and a great American, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mac. Clayton H. Mickelsen was born August 16, 1911 in Yakima. After graduating from Lincoln High School in Portland, Oregon, he went on to California, where he earned an Associate of Arts degree from Glendale Junior College. He came here to what was then known as State in the fall of 1935 and graduated in 1939 with both Bachelor of Science and Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degrees. Many parts of the story of Dr. Mickelsen's life we have heard today or have been alluded to in some manner during this program. He entered the Army as a veterinarian and was assigned to active duty in the Philippines, where he was stationed at the time of the outbreak of World War II. We know of his heroic actions, which earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. We know he was captured and took part in the Bataan Death March. And we later know that he died in a Japanese prison camp just weeks before the end of the war. However, I think it's quite appropriate to do even more to illuminate the outstanding individual we're honoring today. I would like to quote to you some excerpts from a letter written to Dean Wilson by Clayton's friend and WSC classmate, Dr. William Dugan of Petaluma, Clayton. Following their graduation from State in June of 1939, Clayton, Dr. Dugan, and another classmate drove to Los Angeles and took the California State Boards. They then took jobs in the area and stayed in touch in what Dr. Dugan refers to as relatively tough days of, and I quote, eagerness, low pay, and struggles with a very new way of life, end quote. Between September 1939 and December 1941, Clayton and Dr. Dugan corresponded, dealing with what Dr. Dugan said in his words were, and I quote, the ups and downs, the good and bad, the hilarious and the sad, end quote. Since Dr. Dugan's hometown of Vancouver, Washington was near Portland, Oregon, where Clayton had lived, Dr. Dugan met both Clayton's mother and father. Consequently, Dr. Dugan corresponded with Clayton's parents during Clayton's capture and prison of war days. He said, and I quote, that he shared their hopes and sorrows and finally their despair when the final news was received. In his letter to Dean Wilson, Dr. Dugan paid tribute to his friend and classmate by saying, he was a most sensitive person with drive and the will to succeed. It is thanks to Dr. Dugan and other classmates of Dr. Mickelsen that this lounge is being dedicated in his honor today. He will not be forgotten. Therefore, with the appreciation of the Board of Regents and the students of Washington State University and this college, and upon the formal recommendation of the WSU College of Veterinary Medicine and the University Facilities Naming Committee, I hereby dedicate the Clayton Hillman Mickelsen Memorial Lounge. This is to be dedicated in lasting tribute and thanks for his patriotism and his dedication to his profession and to our university.
We've now heard of a young veterinarian in an early battle of the Second World War who saw his duty and did it. We pray that neither we nor our sons and daughters nor their sons and daughters will be forced to do their duties again in war. But in war or peace, we all have our duties, and we must all respond whatever our position or station. As Daniel Webster wrote, quote, a sense of duty pursues us ever. It is omnipresent like deity. If we take to ourselves the wings of morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, duty performed or duty violated is still with us, for happiness or misery. If we say the darkness shall cover us, in the darkness as in light, our obligations are with us. May God grant us the ability to do our duty in whatever we're called to do, just as Clayton did his duty. Thank you very much.